Imagine stopping for a quick lunch at a quiet roadside diner, and realizing a child across the room is silently begging for help. A retired Marine notices a tiny hand gesture, one that could mean life or death, and what happens next will leave you breathless. This is the true story of how a single moment of awareness saved a young girl from danger. Help me. Those words weren't spoken aloud, yet they echoed like a sharp alarm in retired Marine Sergeant Daniel Cole's mind the instant he noticed the little girl in the red dress. It was early afternoon on a bright spring day, the kind when sunlight spills through windows and makes everything look warmer than it feels. Daniel had pulled off the interstate to stretch his legs and grab a quick bite at a quiet rest-stop diner he'd passed dozens of times during road trips. The place smelled of strong coffee and sizzling bacon, with the faint sweetness of maple syrup drifting from a stack of pancakes at the next table. Silverware clinked against ceramic plates while an old jukebox in the corner hummed out a mellow country tune. Truckers chatted near the counter, a family of tourists compared maps, and a waitress balanced 3 steaming mugs with easy skill. It was the kind of small-town stop where nothing dramatic ever seemed to happen. Daniel slid into a booth by the window, his back automatically to the wall, a habit he'd kept from years of service. He ordered black coffee and a slice of pie, more for the break than the food. His posture relaxed, but his senses never really did. After a career spent scanning rooftops, alleys, and crowded markets overseas, his eyes still moved with quiet precision, observing exits, noting faces, cataloging details most people would overlook. That's when he saw her. Across the diner, in a booth tucked near the far corner, sat a young girl no older than 8 or 9. Her bright red dress stood out against the yellow leather seat, its ruffled sleeves slightly crumpled, as if she'd been traveling for hours. Her small frame seemed almost swallowed by the booth, and she sat unusually straight, hands folded tightly in her lap. Beside her sat a man in a tailored blue suit, the kind more suited to a corporate boardroom than a highway cafe. His slicked back hair gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and a thin gold tie clip flashed each time he shifted. He held a folded newspaper in one hand, but Daniel noticed he wasn't really reading it. His eyes kept darting toward the girl with a cold, watchful intensity, like a hawk guarding prey. Something about their pairing struck Daniel immediately as strange. Most travelers at the diner wore jeans and t-shirts, not pressed suits. More than that, there was no easy warmth between them, no laughter, no casual conversation, not even the quiet comfort of family silence. Instead, an uneasy tension hung over their table, a stillness that prickled the air. The girl's face was calm on the surface, but her eyes told another story. Wide and alert, they scanned the room the way someone does when they're searching for an exit, or a lifeline. She barely touched the water glass in front of her. Her feet, in scuffed sneakers, didn't swing like a child's usually would, they rested flat on the booth's edge, as if bracing for something. Daniel felt the hairs on his arms rise. His training had taught him to listen to that quiet internal warning. Something wasn't right. He shifted slightly, angling for a better view without drawing attention. The man said something low and sharp. Daniel couldn't catch the words, but he saw the girl's shoulders stiffen. Her small hands clenched tighter in her lap. Every detail fed the unease building in Daniel's chest, the girl's rigid posture, the man's controlled but possessive movements, the heavy silence between them. He took a slow breath, his mind already cataloging possibilities. Maybe it was nothing, a tired father and shy daughter. Maybe. But the Marine in him, the one who had walked into too many dangerous situations to ignore instinct, whispered otherwise. And as Daniel continued to watch, that unspoken plea echoed louder in his head, "Help me." Daniel kept his gaze steady, careful not to draw attention, but every sense in his body felt sharpened to a fine point. Years in the Marines had trained him to notice the smallest flicker of movement, the subtlest shift in atmosphere, and right now everything about that corner booth screamed danger. He forced himself to breathe evenly as he stirred his coffee, pretending to focus on the tiny whirlpool it created. The man in the blue suit flipped his newspaper open with deliberate slowness, though his eyes never truly left the girl. He muttered something Daniel couldn't hear, his mouth barely moving. The girl gave a stiff nod, her expression blank. But the tension in her small shoulders betrayed her. Then it happened. The girl raised her right hand just slightly above the table, palm facing outward as if she were casually stretching. But Daniel saw something far more precise. She tucked her thumb into her palm and folded her fingers down over it in a smooth, deliberate motion. It was quick, no more than a heartbeat, and then her hand returned to her lap. Daniel's pulse kicked hard. That was no random movement. Months earlier he'd watched a public safety video about a new, silent SOS hand signal that had spread across social media, thumb folded into the palm, fingers closed over it. It meant I'm in danger. I need help. It was designed so victims could call for assistance without saying a word, even while sitting beside their abuser or captor. He replayed what he'd just seen in his mind to be sure. Yes. There was no mistaking it. Daniel glanced toward the booth again, masking the motion with a casual sip of coffee. The man in the suit hadn't noticed. His attention remained locked on the folded newspaper like it contained the world's secrets. But the girl's eyes, wide, steady, pleading, locked with his for an instant. In that brief connection, Daniel read everything: fear, desperation, and a fragile thread of hope. He gave the slightest nod, almost imperceptible, but enough to reassure her that he'd understood. Her lips parted for the tiniest fraction of a second, perhaps a silent thank you, before she looked back down at her hands. Daniel's mind raced. He knew better than to rush over and confront the man. If this was what it appeared to be, a direct confrontation could trigger violence or a dangerous escape attempt. He needed to stay calm, to think like the soldier he once was, gather intel, plan, execute. He scanned the diner for allies. The hostess stood at the counter entering an order into the register. 2 truck drivers sat near the window chatting over pancakes. A middle-aged couple laughed quietly in a corner booth. None of them seemed aware of the quiet crisis unfolding just feet away. His gaze swept the room again. Where were the exits? 2 doors, the main entrance by the hostess stand and a side door near the restrooms. He could cover either in seconds if needed. The diner phone was behind the counter. Good. That could be the lifeline. Daniel lowered his cup and pretended to check his phone, using the reflection of the dark screen to keep watching the pair. The man shifted uncomfortably and glanced toward the window as if checking for someone outside. A muscle ticked in his jaw. He reached for the girl's wrist, just for a moment, too firm to be a casual touch. Her body tensed, but she didn't pull away. Daniel's stomach tightened. Every instinct screamed that time was running out. He had seen combat, ambushes, hostage negotiations, but this quiet, domestic danger was in its own way more chilling. There were no battle lines here, no uniforms. Just a child silently begging for someone, anyone, to act. He drew a slow breath, steadying himself. This was no longer just a road trip stop. This was a mission. And failure was not an option. Daniel's heart thudded with a heavy, deliberate rhythm as he considered his next move. He knew from experience that rushing in without a plan could turn a dangerous situation into a deadly one. The little girl's silent plea for help replayed in his mind like a siren, but he forced himself to breathe steadily. Years of military training had drilled one lesson into him above all others: assess, plan, execute. He quickly scanned the diner again, this time cataloging every detail as if mapping a battlefield. 2 truck drivers near the window laughed at a joke, oblivious. A middle-aged couple shared a slice of pie in the far corner. The hostess, a young woman in her 20s, stood behind the counter entering an order into the register. The cook's head bobbed behind the pass-through window, the hiss of a grill punctuating the low murmur of conversation. Every second mattered, but Daniel had to act smart. First step, communication. He rose casually from his booth, slipping his phone into his pocket. His movements were slow, deliberate, designed to draw no attention from the man in the blue suit. He crossed the room toward the counter, feigning the need for a refill. "Hey," he said to the hostess, keeping his voice calm but firm. "I need you to call 911. Right now." The hostess blinked, startled. "Sir?" "There's a child in danger," Daniel said, his eyes steady on hers. "Do it quietly. Don't look at them. Just call and say you have a possible abduction in progress. Tell the police it's urgent. Something in his tone, years of quiet authority, made her swallow her question. She nodded, grabbed the phone, and ducked behind the counter, her fingers trembling as she dialed. Daniel leaned casually against the counter, as if waiting for his coffee. But his attention never left the pair in the corner booth. The man was watching the door now, tapping his fingers impatiently on the table. Maybe he sensed something. Maybe he was simply getting ready to leave. Either way, Daniel's window to act was shrinking fast. He replayed his options. Confronting the man outright could spark panic or violence. Trying to physically restrain him might put the girl in harm's way. He needed to contain the situation until law enforcement arrived. The hostess returned, her voice low. "Police are on their way," she whispered. "They said a patrol car is close." "Good," Daniel murmured. "Stay calm and stay near the phone." He turned slightly, his eyes locking on the booth. The man suddenly folded his newspaper and placed it on the table with a sharp snap. He leaned in, speaking to the girl in a tone Daniel couldn't hear but didn't like. Then he reached across the table and took her small hand in his, holding it firmly, possessively. Daniel's pulse quickened. The man was about to move. He shifted his weight, positioning himself halfway between the pair and the main entrance. His mind mapped out every step he might need to take. Distance, 15 feet. Obstacles, 2 tables, 1 chair. Angle of approach, clear. If the man tried to bolt, Daniel could close the gap in seconds. The girl glanced up again, her eyes catching his across the room. That same silent message shone in them, "Please don't let him take me." Daniel gave her the slightest nod, a promise without words. The man stood abruptly, pulling the girl's arm to urge her from the booth. Her sneakers squeaked softly against the linoleum floor as she slid out, her shoulders tight with fear. Daniel's muscles coiled like a spring. He forced himself to stay outwardly calm, but every instinct told him the moment of decision was seconds away. This was it, the point where careful planning met action. He squared his shoulders and stepped forward, ready to intercept. The moment the man in the blue suit guided the girl toward the exit, Daniel stepped into motion. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone who'd spent years controlling dangerous situations. His boots barely made a sound on the diner's linoleum floor, but his presence filled the narrow aisle between tables like a wall. "Afternoon," Daniel said evenly, planting himself just inside the doorway. His voice was casual but carried an unmistakable authority. The man tightened his grip on the girl's small hand and stopped short. He sized Daniel up in an instant, broad shoulders, steady stance, eyes that didn't flinch. "Excuse us," the man replied curtly, his tone slick but strained. "We need to be on our way." Daniel offered a polite half-smile. "Road trip, huh? Long drive?" He tilted his head slightly, as if making small talk, but his eyes never left the man's face. "That's none of your business," the man snapped. His other hand shifted, almost protectively, toward his jacket pocket. "Please move." Daniel's muscles tensed. His training screamed to watch the hands, always the hands. "Sure," Daniel said calmly, "but the little one doesn't look too happy about leaving." "You okay, sweetheart?" The girl's lips trembled. For a heartbeat, she didn't move. Then she gave the faintest shake of her head. That was all the confirmation Daniel needed. "I think we should all slow down a second," he said, his voice firming. The man's eyes narrowed, a flash of anger breaking through his polished exterior. "I'm her uncle," he said sharply. "Her parents know where she is. We're late. Step aside." "Funny," Daniel replied, still polite but sharper now. "Most uncles I know don't make their nieces signal for help with their hands." The man stiffened. His gaze flicked toward the counter, where the hostess pretended to wipe down menus, phones still clutched near her side. Somewhere outside, faint but unmistakable, came the distant wail of a siren. The man heard it too. His jaw tightened. "This is ridiculous," he barked. He tugged at the girl's arm, trying to pull her forward. Daniel moved instantly, placing a broad hand gently but firmly on the girl's other shoulder. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his tone low but unyielding. The man's eyes blazed. "Get your hands off." "Sir," Daniel interrupted, his voice cutting like a blade, "if you care about staying out of jail, you'll stop right now." For a long, tense moment, the diner seemed to hold its breath. The clatter of dishes from the kitchen stopped. Even the jukebox's soft tune felt distant. Daniel's stance was relaxed but unmistakably ready, the man could sense it. This was someone who knew how to fight, and win. Then the flash of red and blue lights swept across the diner's windows, painting the walls in pulses of color. 2 uniformed officers burst through the door, hands hovering near their holsters. "Police," one of them announced. "Everyone stay calm." The man stiffened but didn't release the girl. "This is a misunderstanding." "Hands where we can see them," the officer commanded, his voice loud and clipped. Daniel stepped back just enough to give the officers a clear line of sight while keeping himself between the man and the exit. The girl slipped slightly behind Daniel, her eyes wide but hopeful. The man hesitated a split second too long. One officer moved forward, gripping the man's wrist with a practiced twist, while the other guided the child gently toward safety. The suspect's protests, angry, sputtering, filled the diner as handcuffs clicked into place. Daniel exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. The girl clutched the edge of his jacket, trembling but safe. Around them, the diner slowly came back to life. A coffee cup clinked, someone let out a shaky sigh, the jukebox carried on with its song. The crisis was over, but Daniel stayed alert until the last echo of sirens faded, ready for anything until he knew she was truly out of harm's way. The tension in the diner slowly dissolved as the officers led the handcuffed man toward the waiting patrol car. The little girl clung to Daniel's sleeve, her small fingers trembling but unwilling to let go. Her wide eyes followed the flashing red and blue lights outside, as if needing proof that the danger was truly over. One of the officers knelt to her level. "You're safe now," he said gently. "We'll call your parents right away." Through quiet sobs, the girl explained that the man was not her uncle at all but a distant acquaintance of her mother who had offered to drive her home after a family gathering. Instead, he had taken a different route and refused to let her call anyone. When he stopped at the diner for coffee, she remembered a school safety lesson about the SOS hand signal and prayed someone would notice. Daniel listened, a slow burn of anger and relief mixing in his chest. He had seen danger in many forms overseas, but nothing felt as personal as this, the kind of threat that could hide behind a friendly smile and a nice suit. "You were incredibly brave," Daniel told her, crouching so his eyes met hers. "You did everything exactly right. That hand signal? Perfect. You saved yourself today." The girl sniffled and managed a tiny, grateful smile. "Thank you for seeing me," she whispered. Daniel felt a lump form in his throat. He gave her a reassuring nod and a small smile of his own. "Anytime, kiddo. You're safe now." As paramedics arrived to check her over, the diner gradually returned to normal. Conversations resumed in hushed tones, cups clinked, and the smell of fresh coffee once again filled the air. The hostess caught Daniel's eye and mouthed a quiet thank you. Outside, the patrol car's lights faded into the distance, carrying the man away to face charges. Daniel stepped into the afternoon sunlight, the highway stretching endlessly ahead. He hadn't planned to be a hero when he stopped for lunch, but fate had a way of putting the right person in the right place at the right time. For Daniel, it was a powerful reminder: vigilance and courage can save a life, even on an ordinary day at a roadside diner. If this powerful story moved you, remember, staying alert can save a life. Give this video a like, share it with friends so more people know the SOS signal, and subscribe for more real-life stories that prove ordinary people can do extraordinary things.